Hi, it's Ian here. Welcome to another 5-minute marketing tip. This week's tip is about the propinquity effect and how you can use that to become more liked and more trusted by your audience. I'll cut through the jargon and explain what it is and how to use it after the break. Hi, welcome back. So if you want to be seen as an authority, one important component is that your audience, the people you're trying to be seen as an authority to, actually like you and trust you. Because if they don't like you and trust you, it's quite unlikely that they'll actually listen to you and believe in your expertise. Now, one way of accomplishing that, in addition to many of the other things I've talked about over recent weeks, is what's known as the Propinquity Effect. Now, the Propinquity Effect was first observed by Leon Festinger, Stanley Schachter and Kurt Bach back in 1950 at MIT in what came to be known as the Westgate studies. In those studies, they basically observed friendship patterns in a small 2-story apartment block. And what they found was that the most important thing in determining who became friends with whom wasn't anything to do with, whether you had a family, your age, your sex, what you were interested in. It was simply how close you were, how close you lived to that other person. So people were much more likely to become friends with people on the same floor than they were with even very similar people on a different floor. And the only people who were friends with people on multiple floors were the people who lived in the stairwells or lived next to the stairwells. And that's because you're living on a floor, you're much more likely to interact and meet and bump into people on that same floor. If you live next to the stairwell, you're likely to meet other people on different floors as they go up and down the stairs. Now, that's been studied in more detail since, and it turns out that the key determining factor is that frequency and regularity of meeting someone, of interacting with them. That's much more important than the depth of any interactions you might have or anything else that you might have in common. In fact, you've probably seen this in your own life. Very many of us have quite strong and long-lasting friendships with people who we accidentally were sat next to at school, or we happen to have been worked in the same office as them at work, or we happen to have shared a flat with them at university, and we often have very little else in common, but because we're continually interacting over that time period, we build a close friendship. In fact, you can see it in the world of entertainment too. On TV, the very highest paid entertainers are usually the ones who come very frequently into our living room on TV, the ones with the very regular shows. So Oprah, Dr. Phil, Judge Judy, Seinfeld, Raymond, all those kind of shows that are regularly on TV, week in, week out, or in some cases day in, day out. We see that person on a regular basis. We treat them and we feel like we know them, we like them, and we essentially see them as friends or family members. Now, when it comes to building authority, the same thing is true. While, of course, as I've covered in previous videos, it's absolutely vital to have your own unique content and ideas that you share with people. It's important to have a unique persona. One important part of building authority so that people like you and trust you is simply to show up regularly. So rather than perhaps writing a brilliant report, publicising that, going on a big speaking tour, and then doing nothing else for a couple of years, it's much more effective to just regularly communicate with people over time. That could be a regular email, a regular video show like this, a regular podcast, a regular blog, a regular webinar, anything as long as you are interacting and communicating with your audience on a regular basis, a frequent basis. And the propinquity effect will mean that people come to like you and trust you through that simply because of the frequency of interaction. So when you are thinking about how do I become seen as an authority, that's one of the key things you have to factor in. What am I going to use? What's the method I'm going to use to get regularly in front of my target audience? I would advise focusing on one first. I mean, it's nice if you can cover every media and be everywhere all at once, but for most of us, we really, initially at least, don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. It's important to focus down on one method that's going to get us in front of our audience on a regular basis. I started off with email. Once I got email kind of sussed, I moved on to using video like this. It may be that once the videos, I've been going for a year or so with the videos, maybe I move on to a podcast as well. So you can add media over time once you're in control of that first or that second media that you're communicating with people on. But get one sorted first, get in front of people, adding value, saying useful, valuable things on a regular basis, and people will come to like you more, they'll come to trust you more, and it will build your authority. See you next week.